Elder Race Part 7, Seeds Best Planted.
Dmitry Kirchenko. 1 month after the failed push through the Amzy, Andorran militarized zone. Private residence, New Moscow. Earth. Demetrius' brother was dead. He felt off balance, as if his inner world's foundations had shifted slightly to fill the hole that Alexei's passing had left behind. He felt as if his soul had drifted away in search of his brother, leaving him behind in a body that suddenly felt unfamiliar and alien. Demetrius' brother was dead. Dmitry sat and brooded as mourning brothers do. Alexei and Dmitry had been twins in every sense of the word. They had been identical in looks and mannerisms. They had shared goals, dreams, and fears. They had even shared women. They had been together for centuries, slowly grinding towards the ascendancy of Kirchenko House, biding their time and hoping for peace. They had both seen the awakening as an opportunity to heal humanity. Despite being forced to enact Protocol 223, they had hoped the quick recovery of human numbers would stimulate a resurgence of human culture, to create a new era of peace. The new generations were to be the future of everything. They were to be the new beginning. They were to be free of the taint's curse. The blue bloods were hard, cold creatures thanks to the horrors that the taint had unleashed upon the galaxy. The things that they had had to do in the name of survival had rendered them broken remnants of what humankind had once been. The calamity had torn humanity asunder in too many ways to count. Such creatures were in no state to rebuild the wonders of human civilization. But the new generations were. They were humankind's only hope, free of the taint. But they are not free of us. Dmitry and Alexei had hatched a desperate plan after they, and all the other houses had played witness to the destruction of an entire species at the hands of Androm Winchester and his band of bloodthirsty murderers. They had realized that the blue bloods had been skewed by the wants of necessity. What humankind needed were fresh faces, untroubled by the memories of the calamity, but aware of its dangers. Under the guise of building a stronger and militarily dominant society through the use of Protocol 223, Alexei and Dmitry had set about building the foundations of a revolution. The new generations would outnumber the blue bloods 101 at the end of the 4 decades mandated by the protocol. They would take over, and finally human leadership would be free of the past. That had been the plan. And they had, of course, expected resistance. Most likely in the form of Androm Winchester. What they had not expected was what he would do and how far he would fall in the pursuit of his goals. They had been naive, and now Alexei was dead. Dmitry buried his face in his hands as he thought through his options. The Reclamation Armada had returned bloodied and disheartened, filled with loss and a burning rage. The board had been destroyed, and the leadership of each of the houses was effectively non-existent. Dmitry did not believe for 1 second that the board had been destroyed by an errant enemy shell, leaving Androm Winchester as the only survivor. Neither did anyone else. He had killed them and taken over, plain as day. However, to say so openly was foolish, as Androm had returned from battle in control of the largest, albeit barely controlled, military force in human space. Whilst his control over the Reclamation Armada was weak at best, secret Winchester bases had immediately begun to pour out millions of troops and ships that had been held in reserve. Dmitry had been unable to believe his eyes. Winchester House must have poured everything they had into those bases. Now, they were the dominant military force in human space, and Androm Winchester had wasted no time in declaring himself emperor. The houses had been stripped of all their assets, and any blue blood found was immediately detained for interrogation. They were, no doubt, already dead. Androm Winchester was wiping the board of anyone he believed capable of stopping him. All that was even capable or inclined to mount any sort of opposition were some small and unimportant organizations of blue bloods banding together for survival, hiding away like rats. Dmitry would join them soon. Dmitry leaned back and surveyed his face in the mirror. It was lined with worry and age, his eyes a bleak and muddy brown, his hair graying and falling out in patches. He was old. So very old. It had been a month since he had lost his brother, but it felt like it had been no more than a moment at times like these. Times when he needed strength. He supposed that it was time to face the truth. The truth that Shi Lin, that beautiful and brave woman, had broadcast to him. Androm Winchester was tainted. Demetrius' bright vision for the unhindered future of the new generations was already threatened in its infancy. He must prepare. He must forge through his loss. He must forget his exhaustion and his pain. He must become steely in his resolve. He must protect what small spark of humanity was left to the new generations after the calamity. Demetrius stood and smoothed his crumpled dressing down about him before immediately crossing to his wardrobe. Revolution waited for no one, and it would not do to greet it in such a state. He emerged from his automated wardrobe, dressed in a subtly tasteful suit with a tie that was resplendent in the customary green, black, and silver of Kurchenko House. He strode from his quarters, already issuing orders to place agents in key organizations within the new empire and have others spreading revolutionary information to the new generations. He would wobble the foundations, in the hope that the new generations would free themselves. As Dmitri boarded his ship, he watched as his quarters detonated into an inferno, obliterating all evidence of his existence there. Displaced air, stirred up into a gale, slammed into the ship for a split second before dissipating. If he was lucky, albeit unlikely, the new regime would think him dead. Dmitri did not betray a hint of emotion as he watched all memories of his brother burn along with their house. He had wallowed in his sorrow for too long. Yes, Alexei was dead, but his dream was not. Gerard Stevenson, first generation. 1 month after the failed push through the AMZ aka Androm's Folly. Dicey Riley's Bar and Grill, Watkins Trench. Brea, far reaches of human colonized space. It was a bar like any other. The walls were made from an assortment of concrete, brick, and steel. The bar itself was made from polished mahogany, imported straight from Earth at a hellishly expensive rate. Bars like this had sprung up all over human space soon after the maturation of the first generation, as many new investors and property owners realized the market for entertainment venues, and alcohol was a lucrative one indeed. Whilst 95% of the human population had been grown and trained for combat in training facilities throughout human space, the board had been greeted with the prospect of having no one to grow their food and make their bullets. The economy was effectively dead. The solution had been to provide the young troopers a choice as they graduated from the training facilities. Stay on as an asset of the military or transfer over to the civilian realm, where they would work on the farms and factories until they acquired enough to start their own businesses if they so desired. Such a level of freedom of choice had been almost unheard of for the new generations. Many had jumped at the opportunity. Others, like Gerard Stevenson, had not. The opportunity turned out to be a bit of a red herring. The houses had maintained tight control over the economy, subsidizing essential industries for the war effort, and ensuring that they were the ones who profited the most. Despite the rapid transformation from nothing to an economic megalith that took place in human society, the vast majority of property and land had been owned by various blue bloods, whilst the new generations had been forced to scrounge and fight for jobs just to get by. That is, until Androm Winchester started to run things. The blue bloods had started to disappear one by one, giving many members of the new generations the opportunity to take their place. Whilst this may have been a welcome change to many of the new generations, Emperor Androm's tight grip over humanity's day-to-day life was becoming more and more draconian by the week, a gradual change that was not lost on the inhabitants of the bar. They had been hungering for freedom since the day they learned it even existed, and just when they had it, it had been snatched away by Androm Winchester and his thugs. Jared, formerly Corporal Stevenson and veteran of Androm's Folly, gulped at his beer as he listened to the weary talk around him that seemed to quietly simmer with dejected resentment. He was a sergeant now, having been promoted thanks to the huge losses that the Reclamation Armada had been forced to endure at the hands of blue blood incompetence. Sure, that bloody Winchester had cleaned up the place a bit when they'd all come home, but he'd also been the one who had ordered the attack in the first place after the board had been jettisoned into space. Some said that Winchester had killed them, and some said that the boardroom had been hit by a planet cracker slug. Either way, Gerard didn't care. All that mattered were the millions that they had left dead at the AMZ, floating in a graveyard made from torn metal and frozen flesh. He and Private Molly O'Reilly had been the only ones to make it out of the planet cracker they had been sent to take. Molly was a brave and fiery woman. Her hair was like flame, and her eyes were as blue as the sky back on Earth. Gerard was an ebony-skinned giant with deep brown eyes. They made an unlikely duo, but their experiences at Androm's Folly had made them inseparable. Experiences that they had only just survived thanks to the sacrifices of 3 Marines who had been little more than boys at the time of their deaths. Gerard would always remember their names: Carlos, Terry, Rox. Their deaths should not have been. If any of the New Generation's members had had any say, no one would have died that day. They never would have been foolish enough to go in. It was obvious that they were outnumbered 10-1. Superior tech and training didn't mean shit if you were outnumbered by a margin like that. Throw planet crackers into the mix, and you had what many would call an unwinnable situation, and what others who were less refined would call a fucking massacre. The New Generations did all the work. The New Generations did all the dying. The New Generations deserved to have a goddamn say. They were worth something. Our lives matter.
What we need is a republic,
Gerard said loudly, surprising himself and everyone else around him. For a moment, Gerard found himself in a pocket of eerie calm as he and Molly sat across from each other, and Gerard loudly exclaimed a word that nobody had really heard before.
The fuck is a republic?
Molly asked, as the conversation around them started up again.
I heard some blue blood talking about it on the way to the MZ.
Gerard admitted.
It's a system of government. All of the humankind used to operate with some variation of it. Basically, everyone gets an equal vote, and they elect a leader who does what the people want. That way, everyone gets a say. Will all actually mean something.
Molly looked at him with incomprehension.
No way that any of the blue bloods will let that happen. We outnumber them like 100-1. No leader will ever look out for them again.
Exactly.
Gerard smiled, his teeth a blazing white against the darkness of his face.
We outnumber them 100-1. Majority fucking rules, Molly. No more control. No more needless blood. We'll get what we need. We'll be able to do what we want. The fuck are we fighting the Xenos for? 'Cause the blue bloods say so, that's why. We're pouring all our resources into a fucking pipe dream.
Gerard's voice gradually started to get louder as he got more and more impassioned by the concept. The conversation around his table once more dimmed as more and more people began to regard him with interest. He didn't notice. So rapt was he with his conversation with Molly.
You and me are only alive today because 3 New Generation boys fucking killed themselves so that we could make it out. Out of the 60 Marines that smashed into that damn planet cracker, it's just you and fucking me. That AMS is red with New Generation blood. I don't see no fucking blue. We need a government that fights for us, rather than treats us like fucking disposable slabs of meat that they grew out of a test tube. We're worth more than that. Our lives fucking matter.
The bar was silent as Gerard's impassioned rant came to an end. Gerard looked up as well, surprised at himself and his effect on the crowd nearby. For a moment he had been lost in 2 distinctly different places. He had been remembering the hellish escape from the planet cracker, and the final light show that had marked their saviors' graves. He had also been lost in a vision of the future, where birth didn't mean shit. The juxtaposition had torn at him. Suddenly he didn't want to be here. He wanted to be somewhere quiet where he could think. His eyes met Molly's, which were crinkled in concern. He needed to be on his own.
I gotta go,
Gerard said gruffly, pushing himself up from the table with a screech of metal on timber.
I'll see you at home.
Molly watched him go as he pushed his way through the bar. As Gerard stepped out of the bar, he was immediately struck by the cold of the nighttime streets. Brea was a newly colonized world that had been taken by the Winchesters during the Karok War. Cleansed of its original inhabitants, the world was just recovering from the quasi-nuclear winter that had been induced by the bombings, thanks to some high-end terraforming techniques that Gerard had no hope of understanding. He pulled a cigarette from his front pocket and lit it, taking a deep drag. It calmed him a little, making the flashes and shrieker screams retreat for a moment. God damn! He hadn't had a chance, had he? Born a soldier, a killer. There's your medal, sonny. God damn. He was leaning against the wall at the lip of an alleyway, lost in a haze of cigarette smoke and bitter memories when he heard a murmur behind him.
I heard your rant in the bar.
The voice was muffled, and Gerard could barely hear him.
Congratulations, buddy,
Gerard said antagonistically, turning to confront the murmurer in the shadows. He was brought up short by something jabbing him in the ribs through his coat, something decidedly knife-like.
What? You work for that rabid dog Winchester? Fine. Fucking stab me. I'll kill you before I die, though. I fucking will.
Snarled Gerard.
I don't work for those bastards any more than you do. The knife is just to make sure you don't turn around. You don't turn around, you don't see my face, and Mr. Knifey here goes away.
There was a pause.
What do you want, then?
Gerard asked, facing straight ahead and straining his ears to catch a hint of who his attacker was.
I just want to give you this.
A data stick slipped into Gerard's hand. He raised it to his face to inspect it more closely in the dim light of the street.
What is it?
It's everything. Open it up and you'll see. The calamity, the blue bloods, everything. I'm leaving now. Don't look back.
Gerard didn't look back as the footsteps receded behind him. He stared at the data stick as if it was the answer to all of his questions, because it was. Vildasi Concori. 1 month after Androm's folly. Human containment facility. Ildor, Andora's second moon. In the entire history of the human conflict, the Council had only been able to capture 2 individuals, only one of which was an actual combatant. One was a sweet and kind individual who had saved Vildasi's life when she had been taken by Tenari pirates. His name was Adam, the other was a mystery. He had not spoken a word since his internment, despite the translator that had been implanted in his brain during his healing phase. That did not mean he was uncooperative. He obeyed orders and went about his daily routine robotically, with little or no fuss. It was as if everything that had made him him was asleep, leaving his empty shell to operate on autopilot until his soul deigned to return. Right now he was running. He had been running for an hour and a half now, traveling at speeds that varied from barely more than a walk to a sprint that seemed to even outpace a shrieker's graceful dash. Sweat made his limbs and torso slick and oily, causing the ridges and imperfections left by scars to shine in the light of the containment facility's yard. He was a warrior. Of that Vildasi had no doubt. His body was an ugly mass of muscle and power, etched in painful scars and tough calluses. Vildasi's instincts screamed that he was dangerous in her innermost places, primal places that would never see the light of day. Her mind knew that he was dangerous. This specimen had been recovered after the great victory at the Amzi. He and 2 others had held the bridge of a battle station against impossible odds, inflicting untold damage to Council equipment and personnel. Just 3 humans had systematically destroyed 47 boarding craft and indirectly murdered 357 Council Marines. Directly, the 3 had killed 16 troopers to hold the bridge. This human before her was the only survivor of his species on that station. Vildasi herself stood behind 4-inch thick impact-proof glass. Each yard had an observation deck like this one, particularly for the facility's more dangerous inhabitants. After it became clear that there was virtually no such thing as a human POW, the Council had chosen to use the facility's state-of-the-art containment capabilities to house some of the Orion Spur's most dangerous criminals. These criminals were crammed into other sections, leaving each human with their own separate yards, destined to never meet.
He is hurting, see? He's hurting in here.
Adam tapped his chest.
And he's broken up here.
Adam tapped his temple. Nobody but Vildasi had ever seen Adam flip his switch and become a cold and feral killer. As such, nobody believed him a threat, making it that much easier for Vildasi to convince the higher-ups to allow him greater freedom inside the containment facility. After all, he wasn't a combatant. He was just a mentally damaged byproduct of an age-long past. Vildasi's specialty was xenobiology and xenoanthropology, and she was one of the few individuals to have encountered a human in an even remotely friendly setting. She was clearly the best candidate to head the research and development wing of the human containment facility. And this was why Adam was with her in the observation deck, so that she may better understand how the human mind and body worked.
What do you mean, hurting Adam?
Vildasi asked gently.
Is he suffering from physical trauma, or is it more spiritual?
He doesn't know.
He said simply.
Doesn't know what, Adam?
Anything. He doesn't understand. He's scared and alone and he's lost. I have to help him.
Adam went to the reinforced door that led into the soldier's yard and attempted to open it, unaware that only Vildaci's keycard would open it. He rattled the door handle for a moment before giving up and turning back to Vildaci, a silent plea clearly present in his eyes.
Why do you want to help him, Adam? You don't know him. You don't know how dangerous he can be.
Vildaci said.
I can't let you in there. It's against the rules.
I want to help him because he is hurting. That's what it means to be human, before the bad things made us what we are. Please, friend Vildaci.
Adam pleaded.
Please, let me help him.
Vildaci knew that her orders were to keep the two separate, but the combination of Adam's plea and curiosity in regard to how two humans would interact with each other for the first time won over her better judgment. She could be severely reprimanded for this, but she owed Adam her life, and this was a chance to actually learn something. Maybe something about Adam's bad things.
Och, Adam. But if he gets angry, you run out of there as fast as you can, you hear?
Vildaci said sternly.
I hear.
Adam sang back happily. Vildaci opened the door and sat back to watch what would transpire. The soldier stopped running as Adam stepped into his yard and turned to stare at him. Adam waved happily at him, which elicited no response. The soldier's stark gray eyes focused on Adam like a predator, and Vildaci began to feel the beginnings of dread deep within her chest, as she realized that she may have sent her friend into danger. Adam closed the distance between them as the soldier stood still, maybe deciding whether to attack, maybe trying to figure out if Adam was a traitor. Vildaci couldn't say. All she could do was stand there with her heart in her mouth and wait.
Hello, friend.
Adam said enticingly.
My name is Adam. What's yours?
Vildaci leaned forward and held her breath as she waited for the soldier's response. If he did, this would mark the first time that he had spoken in a month.
Carlos.
Carlos croaked, seemingly surprised at the sound his voice made.
How old are you, Carlos?
Carlos swallowed a few times before answering.
I'm 13.
Vildaci froze. She didn't know much about human biology and time increments, but what she did know from Adam's ramblings did not match up with what she was seeing. A 13-year-old adolescent human should be drastically shorter and thinner than Carlos, who was clearly fully developed and in his prime. From what Vildaci had surmised, a 13-year-old human child was the same as a youngling Andorran barely on the cusp of their second growth spurt. A being at such an age had no place anywhere near the battlefield. Clearly there had been some kind of hormone tampering, which explained where humanity's boundless numbers had come from. Vildaci's midnight eyes widened in horror as she realized that humanity was throwing their children into the meat grinder.
So young, friend Carlos. So young, see. Who do you miss? Who is gone away?
Adam cooed gently.
My friends.
Carlos said, his voice wavering.
I lost my friends on the station, and I don't even know why. We were all supposed to die together, but they left me behind.
Adam nodded gently.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
You are young, friend Carlos. Young people aren't supposed to know anything, see? They're supposed to be looked after. I can look after you now, if you want.
It seemed an eternity before Carlos nodded slightly.
Do you want to come see my garden?
Carlos nodded wordlessly again as Adam led him back towards the reinforced door. Before Vildaci could react, he was using her keycard to open the door and lead him through.
Everyone should have a garden.
Adam beamed.
Everyone should see something grow.
Vildaci watched wordlessly as Adam led Carlos into his own yard, where he had spent months tirelessly digging and watering and coaxing leafy green plants out from the earth.
In the garden, there is peace.